Hello, hi everybody. Welcome to the Tuesday Travel Chat. My name is Natasha Ho. I am so excited to be back with you guys again this week. And this week we are headed to one of my favorite places in the entire world. We are headed to a land down under. I will not subject you to my accent, it's terrible. But that's right, we are headed to Australia today. We are going to Australia for our staycation. Let me know, have you ever dreamed of going to Australia? For me, it was one of the destinations that I dreamed about for the longest, of being able to go there. So it was actually the last continent besides Antarctica that I had never been to, and so I had been planning this trip for a really long time. And Australia for me was just a really huge and amazing place that I'd always dreamed about, because you see the animals and you hear the stories about the history, and it's just such a remarkable and intriguing place. So if you've ever dreamed of going to Australia, today will be a chance for you to get a taste of what an Australian vacation would be like. I will share with you today a sample of the things that you can do, eat, and watch to bring a taste of Australia, to bring a taste of the land down under to you right at the comfort of your own home. So really excited for today, because Australia is one of my absolute favorite places that I've ever been to. Some of the friendliest people that I've actually ever met also in any of my vacations. So really excited for today's video. So a little bit of background on Australia, where we're headed today. Australia is unique in that it is both a country and a continent, and it is located right in between the Pacific Ocean and the Indian Ocean. It's just south of Asia. And Australia, the indigenous people have lived on the land of Australia for more than 65,000 years. It's actually the oldest known land of all the continents is Australia. So it's a really, really long, amazing history. And then, you know, in modern times, Europeans arrived in the 16 and 1700s in Australia, and famously it was used as a penal colony by the British. They always say all the criminals were sent over to Australia, so Australia is a land of criminals, but it actually not. Obviously, that was hundreds of years ago, so now has plenty of law-abiding, wonderful people that live in Australia. But that's just a little bit of background to get you started on where we're headed today, to Australia. One of the things that I think of, and you may think of also when you think of Australia, is all of the animals. Like I said, it's a super mega diverse country, and I think of, you know, the koalas, and I think of kangaroos and wombats and wallabies and penguins and platypuses or platypi. Which one is it? It's one of those, I think. But I think of all of the amazing and weird animals that only live in Australia. Of course, all of the very dangerous and venomous ones as well, the snakes and spiders and all of those things. So Australia is known for having a really diverse wildlife there. And so one of the great ways that you can experience Australia is to get up close and personal with some of the animals that are really unique to Australia. You won't find them anywhere else in the world. And so there is an organization that will allow you to do live video feeds of the animals. So you can get animal cams and you can tune in and see the animals live in person. I have a link for you in the blog post that is shared with this video, so you go and check out the description box and you'll find a link. And within there, there's also information on the feed times for all of the animals, so you can actually see them when they're most active. You can see them when they're up, and the koalas are eating their eucalyptus and they're moving around. They actually move really, really slowly. They won't be moving that much, since koalas don't move that much generally on a regular basis, but you get to see them live and in action and being their cute, cuddly little selves. So that part is really, really cool. Just remember, it is on Australia time, so it might be in the middle of the night for some of us if we're trying to watch the live animal feeds. They also have on there other videos that you can watch of like tours of the different zoos. They also have live safaris on there that you can watch, as well as talks with some of the zookeepers who will share with you some of their fascinating experiences of working with these animals that you won't find anywhere else in the world. So that is a really cool experience that I highly recommend, because for me, the animals was a huge part of going to Australia, going to some of the conservation places, going to, we actually actually visited Kangaroo Island while we were there in Australia. I visited with my husband and walked around, and so there's just wild kangaroos just jumping around in the middle of a meadow, and they didn't seem to mind us humans too much. I've actually heard before that there are like more kangaroos in Australia than people. Like there's 2 kangaroos to each person in Australia. So the kangaroos have their run of the land, but they didn't seem too aggressive. I wouldn't probably try to get too close to them. I think, you know, doing the video live feed thing is probably the safe bet because they are very, very strong and large. We've stayed with a family while we were in Australia through Airbnb, and they had a pet kangaroo who was living in their backyard. And I will share a picture with you guys of this guy, and he was enormous. He was the most muscular animal I have ever seen. He was huge, and he was standing up in the backyard just looking like the most menacing, like, boxer that you've ever seen. So yeah, I wouldn't get too close. I think the live feed is the perfect way to go with checking out the kangaroos, because then you don't have to worry too much about getting into a boxing match with a kangaroo. The next thing that I think I always recommend is a great way for you to have an immersive experience in a new place and to really get exposure to a culture and to the stories of the culture is through movies. I absolutely love movies as a way to transport us to new places, and so I always recommend include movie options for you all. And there's a few that I would recommend for taking you on your Australian staycation. The first film is called Rabbitproof Fence. And I actually watched this film several years ago, and it's based on true events. It's a heartbreaking story, but also like a really important story that should be told. And it is about a time period in Australian history when children who were of mixed race, they were white and Aboriginal, they were taken away from their families and put in these internment camps that were supposed to basically get them to assimilate to white European culture and trying to stamp out the Aborigine culture from these children and from their families. So it's a really, really important film, like I said, and it gives you a really great appreciation for the history of what was going on in Australia and how much the Aborigine people have gone through and experienced in their journey. They're still very much a part of the community in Australia, so I think it's really important to understand and hear their stories in order to have an appreciation for Australia and everything that has gone on. Like I said, 65,000 years the people have been living there, so there is a lot of history there, and this film is just a really great place to start in learning just one story that will tell you a little bit more about their journey. Another film that I like, this one is a little lighter in terms of content. It's called The Castle, and this movie is one that will introduce you to Australian humor, which is a little bit different than humor. You know, if you're thinking American or British humor, Australians have their own sense of humor, and so this one is a perfect one to kind of give you exposure to that. This movie is about a family from Melbourne who their land that they live on is trying to be seized by the state, and so it's about their fight to hold on to the piece of land. I think they want the land for an airport, and so the family is fighting back in order to keep their piece of land where their castle is built, where their home is built, and so having kind of the Australian dream of having your own piece of land and having your home there, and so them fighting for their castle. So that's a lighter story. That is also worth checking out. And the last one is a really cute and heartwarming story that I thought would be great for a family watch, and it's called Paper Planes. It's a story about a family that live in a small town. It's a father and son, and the little boy enters into win a paper planes contest. So it's a contest where they're folding paper planes and learning how to fly them, and so he enters the contest, and it's all about his journey of learning how to create paper planes and his relationship with his dad and his friends and everything. So it's a really cute story, and I loved it mostly because you get to hear Australian accents coming out of these tiny little people, so they're super adorable and they have these fun Australian accents. I love listening to an Australian accent just personally, so if you like listening to an Australian accent, all of these movies will be right up your alley. The next thing is things to eat. We always love a good meal to take us to new places. And so for Australia, one of the things that Australia is really known for is cafe culture. This might not be something that you're aware of, but cafe culture is really popular, especially in Melbourne. By the way, it's pronounced Melbourne for anybody who's wondering why I'm saying it like that, and you may be saying Melbourne when you look at it on paper. All of the Australians pronounce it Melbourne, so that's why I'm saying it like that. I'm trying to be authentic to the Australian way, but if you want to say Melbourne, have it your way. So anyways, it's very popular especially in the city of Melbourne. And so coffee is like, finding a great cup of coffee is pretty much top-notch. Coffee is available everywhere in Australia, and this is partially due to the immigration of Italian immigrants to Australia. They brought their love of coffee to Australia, so you can find great coffee everywhere. And this is a really great way that you can be whisked away into the outback, is through a cup of coffee, not through throwing a shrimp on the barbie. So if you thought that I was gonna say, head to Outback Steakhouse, it's not gonna be that. It's actually through a cup of coffee, simple enough. And the most popular version of coffee, the most popular way to enjoy coffee in Australia is the flat white. That is the drink of choice. And the flat white is similar to a latte. It's like a cousin of the latte in a lot of ways, but there are a few slight minor differences that I will read off for you just to make sure I get it right, because I was trying to figure out what was the exact difference. So a flat white is a little bit less microfoam than a latte. It also has less volume, so you have less total volume in the flat white, but it's still a cream and espresso combination. So it's a slight twist on the latte, and you can find them at a lot of coffee shops also. So if you even go to like a Starbucks, you can order a flat white, or you can make one at home. Super easy. I have a recipe for you in the blog post that I have attached to this. And if you want to have the perfect snack to accompany your Australian flat white, I suggest having some Tim Tams, which I absolutely adore. It is a chocolatey biscuit that is from Australia. They now ship them all around the world, so you can find them at your regular grocery store, but they're super yummy and good. It has like a wafer kind of thing on the inside and chocolate on the outside and a soft, like, yummy goodness in the inside. It's super, super good, and I highly recommend it. There's also another great snack that you can try out, are Anzac biscuits or Anzac cookies. And the Anzac cookie is actually most often associated in commemoration of Anzac Day. And Anzac Day is a day that memorializes the day that the Anzac troops, which are the Australian and New Zealander troops, landed in Gallipoli during World War I. So that cookie is often served on that day, but it's something that is super popular throughout Australia. You'll find it served with, tea or with a coffee. So Anzac cookies are a great way to transport you off to the land of Australia. And if you're feeling adventurous, you can also go even a step further than that and try out some kangaroo meat. And there are lots of places that you can find kangaroo meat. Actually, you can order it online, obviously. I also recently found some kangaroo jerky, which was amazing and super delicious. It's really, really healthy and lean meat, and so it's a great alternative because it's also quite sustainable in terms of as a meat source. So you can try out some kangaroo meat as another way, even though I know I was talking earlier about how sweet and cuddly and awesome the animals are. I feel a little bad now telling you to go eat kangaroo meat, but it's actually really delicious. So I definitely recommend trying out kangaroo meat if you've never tried it before, because it'll definitely make you feel like you're doing something that you would only do if you were on vacation in Australia. The other thing I wanted to talk about are things to do. So we always go over eat, watch, and do. And so some things that you can do to bring Australia home. The first one is doing a bushwalk. Bushwalking, as they say in Australia, is about going into the bush, and that basically is just the outdoors or any wild piece of land and going outside and really enjoying the outdoors, feeling at one with nature and having an appreciation for all of the things that you can find outside. So going for a bushwalk, you know, here in the US we might call it a walk or a hike or something like that, but you can call it a bushwalk to really make it feel like it's more Australian. And you can go, you know, anywhere really, to a national park, which I always highly recommend as awesome places to go, but you can go anywhere that's near you, whatever kind of park, a meadow, a desert, all sorts of different types of terrain will bring you back to a part of Australia, because it's mega diverse. So if you're walking through a desert, there are many amazing desert areas in Australia, so it can kind of transport you to a place in Australia, rainforest areas, forested areas, by the water, in a meadow, all of those different things. And the wonderful part, the nice part of doing a bushwalk at home and not in Australia, is you don't have to worry about all of the venomous snakes and venomous spiders that you would have to worry about if you were in Australia. Hopefully wherever you are, that wouldn't be a concern for you. You wouldn't have to worry about some, you know, venomous animal coming up and biting you. So that's the upside of doing your bushwalk at home. The other thing that I would suggest doing is kind of a throwback to Australia's Aborigine past, and that is learning how to throw a weapon like a boomerang or a spear. So the people that, first, the indigenous people that inhabited Australia, they were hunter-gatherers, and so they had to go out there and hunt, you know, and kill birds and fish in order to survive and feed themselves. So back then they would use things like spears and boomerangs as ways for them to catch their meals. So I don't know, how many of you guys think that you would be able to survive if you had to go out and catch your own meal? You can raise your hand, give me an emoji if you think that you could go out there and survive. I want to know, because this is actually something I've thought a lot about since we've been in pandemic times, and people are kind of, you know, going back to some of the old school skills and, you know, gardening and doing all those things, and people were a little bit worried when they were saying like, oh, we're gonna run out of meat and all these kinds of things. Like, how many of you guys think that you'd be able to, you know, survive if you had to go out there with a spear and get your own meal? Like, I want to know. So leave me an emoji. Let me know if you think you would be able to survive if you had to go out there and catch your own meal. And if you want to try and test your skills, you can do that by learning how to throw a spear or a boomerang. So to get a spear or boomerang, obviously you can either buy one or you can learn to fashion your own. And so I pulled a couple videos for you to show you how to make your own spear or your own boomerang right at home, which is a fun little activity that you can add in addition to learning how to use them. But with the spear, it's actually pretty simple in terms of the tools that you'll need. And then once you get the spear, it's somewhat intuitive to learn how to throw the spear. When I went to Australia, we were in the city of Port Douglas, and we met with an Aborigine tour guide. His name was Michael, and he took us to an area to teach us a bunch of things, but one of which was learning how to throw a spear. And so I can say proudly that I was terrible. I absolutely sucked at throwing the spear. I'm not at all gifted in terms of being a hunter. Maybe I was meant to be a gatherer, I don't know. But you can using practice, you can get really good at it. So all he did was he had us stand on the beach, and he put a coconut in the middle of the sand, and he had us all aim to try to throw the spear at the coconut and hit it into the coconut. So really, I think it's all about the practice, similar to, you know, kind of like if you're thinking of javelin throwing or something like that. It's all about the practice, learning how to get your swing just right in order to throw the spear. But if you want to learn how to throw a boomerang, which I think is probably a little bit less intuitive, I also have put together a tutorial for you guys to give you a little bit of background on boomerangs and how to throw one. And with a boomerang, this is something that I learned through my research, is there are multiple kinds of boomerangs. There's not just one style. The one that you're probably most familiar with, or that you saw growing up like in cartoons and on TV, is called a returning boomerang. So that's the one that you throw the boomerang and then it will come spinning right back in hopefully not hit you, but hopefully right in front of you so you can catch it. And so the returning boomerang came out of a non-returning boomerang. So originally the Aborigine people used boomerangs in order to throw them at birds, in order to kill the birds so they can eat birds. And so they were called kylies, is what the Aborigine people called it. And so over time, the legend is that there was one that was fashioned, and as they threw it, they realized that it arced back to them and returned. And so that particular style, they started creating more of that one. But it's not actually really used for hunting. The returning style is not used for hunting because it's not effective, because you can't really aim it very well because it kind of starts to spin and arc backwards. So it's more of a sporting type of boomerang. It's not one that's used for hunting. The non-returning boomerang, the one that will be able to go directly in one direction, is much easier to aim, and that one is actually used for hunting. So there's more than one kind of boomerang. The returning ones look really cool, so they're still really fun to learn how to throw, and the Aborigine use those as more of a sport, something fun to do versus using them for a function of hunting. So I have information for you guys in the blog post on how to buy or create your own boomerang, as well as how to learn how to throw it. I was watching the video, and I was a little bit intimidated because I remember trying to do it, I think when I was younger, and having accidentally like throwing it up in the air and it smacking me in the head because I was really terrible at it. I'm really bad at all of these like very basic primitive skills, so I don't know what that says about me, but I highly recommend and encourage you to try it. Just make sure you wear like a helmet or something, because it might come back and hit you in the head. And I put on display over here are the boomerang that we brought back from our trip to Australia. Both of these are pieces of artwork that we picked up while we were in Australia. So I thought I would display them today on our escapade to the land down under. And speaking of kind of all of the history, I think the perfect way to wrap up your staycation and your trip to Australia is to visit the Immigration Museum, which is in Melbourne, Australia. Australia has a long history of welcoming immigrants from all sorts of countries to its shores, and they've contributed a lot to the culture of the country. That was one of the amazing things that I realized in visiting Australia and in meeting so many of the people there, was how many immigrants there were. We went out to eat, and all of these restaurants were like the top rated restaurants. They all had Asian influences, or they had there was African influences, and so there was a bunch of different kinds of foods and cuisines there. Every person that we met when we were encountering the staff at like all of the different hotels or restaurants and things like that would tell us their story of where they came from, whether they came from the US or they came from Europe or Asia. They came from all over the place. And so it was really, really cool to meet all of these people and hear the story of what brought them to Australia. And the fact that Australia has such an open door policy to welcome people and allow them to come in and contribute to the culture of Australia. So I highly recommend visiting the Immigration Museum. Immigration Museum. I thought I had misspoke. Immigration Museum in Melbourne, Australia. This particular museum, they have a bunch of great online things that you can check out. They have exhibits, obviously, and as well as some really amazing stories that you can hear firsthand stories from immigrants who have now moved to Australia and now call Australia home. There's also stuff for kiddos on there, different activities that you can do with kids, from artwork things to all sorts of puzzles and fun activities that little ones will enjoy. So I thought that was pretty cool, is that they have stuff that's geared specifically to the kids. And I think in the immigration story of people leaving their homeland and coming to a new place resonates with me, especially because of my family and our history. And I know many of you as well probably have stories from your parents and grandparents or great-grandparents that have been passed down of their immigration story and how they moved from the land of their youth or the place that they know and their family, and going to a new place. My mom, she immigrated from Panama with my grandmother, and they came to the United States in order to give me and the future generations a better life. So I think it's a story that many of us, I'm getting emotional. but many of us have firsthand experience with. And so I think that it has strong ties, not just in terms of learning about Australia, but the story that so many of us experience and what really is part of the human experience, I think. So highly recommend checking out the Immigration Museum. So that, I think, wraps it up for today. Those are my tips for things that you can see, watch, eat, and do to give you a taste of Australia. And like I said at the beginning, this is just a little sampler of things that you can do to get you started on an Australian staycation, so you can feel like a true Aussie. But I would love, if you are interested, so let me know, are you interested? Do you want to have a full-on immersive week or weekend in Australia? If the answer is yes, just write yes in the comments and I will get in touch with you to give you details on how to do like a full-on immersive escape to Australia that will really whisk you away for an awesome Aussie staycation. So go ahead and just leave a yes comment in the comments and I will get in touch. So that wraps us up for today. I hope you enjoyed our trip to a land down under. And if you need anything else, or if you have recommendations of other places that you would love to see, as I always say, please let me know. I love having your recommendations for inspiration. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday and have an awesome week. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.